Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with topologizing in Blender. If this is your first time with topologizing, I suggest you watch this video and you follow me step by step. If you have retopologized before, then you can just skip this video and move on to the next. For all you beginners out there, and come and hang with me. So, as you see, the default setup of Blender here. Alright, you see the cube and the lights and everything. We just delete the cube. Let's go ahead and create a UV sphere. So this is going to act like our character. This is serve as our character. Let's go to our sculpt mode. And we could go to our remesher. And for our remesher voxel size, we're going to make this fairly dense. So 0.03. And let's remesh that. And you hit tab key, you can see how we have a lot of geometry now. Tab key again to get a sculpting mode. We can go to our strip brush and just add a little bit of eye socket here, just so that we have something to work with. So we're doing this, creating just a simple character face here, just so that I could better show you guys how the retopology works. All right, I think it's best for us to start with a simple face, then retopologizing, moving on to retopologizing full body realistic character. So yeah, it's best to do this, especially if you're starting out. Just starting with something simple. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and remesh this. There you go. And we could even just kind of smooth this out. Okay, so this is just something for us to play around with. Now let's go back to object mode. So let's say this is our simple face of the character that we want to retopologize, and we want to retopologize it because if we go to the tab key, you see the topology is not very clean. You see the topology is just kind of like all over the place. There's really no flow to the topology. The topology is not following the shape of the face. So what we need is a clean topology that will follow the contour of the facial features, because if you want to animate this character later on and you want to just deform the eyes and the mouth, you need to make sure that the topology is having a nice flow to it. So what I mean by that is, let's say for the circular part of the eyes here, the eye socket, the type of topology that you need is, let me just make this smaller. The type of topology you need is something that has like a circular loop here. So as you can see, it to follow the form of the eye socket. So you need to have the circular loop around the eyes, because when you have a circular loop in the eyes, so let's say you have the eyeballs of the character, if you have this nice edge loop here of topology, right, in the eye area, what the animator could do later on is the animator could easily select the vertices here for the edges and the vertices, and the animator could easily make this character blink because of the nice clean topology that you have provided. You have this nice circular loop that follows the shape of the eyes, and it could be so much easier to deform it than having what you have right now. So this is not a clean topology, or it's just not following the form at all. And it's the same for the mouth area. So let's say you have like a circular shape of the mouth. What you need to have is more like a circular loop for the face of the character, so it'll be animatable. And it's going to be, if you have the body of the character, you're gonna have to make sure that the topology is clean. It's not just all over the place. You want it to have to follow the overall shape of your face, the overall shape of the body of the character. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why it's important to retopologize, to be able to have nice clean topology for the animators to use later. If you want to hand in your model to a rigger animator and you want it to be production ready, retopologizing is a very important part of the process. Another thing why we need to retopologize is because if you look here, it's very, very dense, the character here. And especially if you have like a full body character and you have a character that's this dense, it's going to be lagging the system, the software program if you have so much geometry here. And the purpose of retopologizing is to create a clean mesh that is also going to be a lot less dense than what we currently have. That way, when the rigger will rig this and to animate it, it's not going to bog down the system. It's going to be so much easier for everyone in the team if you're to hand this to someone who's going to work on this animation. So retopologizing, it's very important part of the production, making a production ready character. Okay, so with that said, let's go to our object mode, and we want to retopologize this character here. All right, how do we retopologize in Blender? Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have turned on the F2 add-on. That's basically the only add-on that we need to make sure is turned on, and I will explain to you what that is later, what the F2 add-on does as we go about in retopologizing. So let's go to our edit. Let's go to our preferences, and on the add-ons section, let's type in F2 on the search here, and then you're gonna see mesh F2. Just make sure it's enabled, check that on, so we're gonna be able to use that later. Okay. Another thing that we need to do is we need to create a plane. Shift A, let's create a plane geometry. So this is going to be the geometry that we're going to be using as our new topology. And let's go ahead and rotate it in X direction and make sure it's 90 degrees rotated. And let's go ahead and scale it down. Yeah, you want to scale it down pretty small, not that small, because you don't want to have, when you're retopologizing at the beginning, you don't really want to have too many, you don't want it to be too small, the geometry, because you're gonna end up with a very dense mesh. Okay, so something like that is fine. Okay, so after you create a new plane, we need to have that plane snap onto the surface of the character's face. So in order for us to be able to snap this, we need to turn on our snap, and we're gonna mess around with the properties there. So let's go ahead and turn on snap, and let's go to the drop down and make sure that you have turn on face, and you're gonna see some more properties here. Snap with closest, so it will snap to the closest target next to the plane geometry. Let's turn on project individual elements, so it will project the elements onto the surface of the other objects. Okay, so now that's on, let's go and test this out. Let's hit the tab key for our plane. Make sure you have your plane selected, hit the tab key. And another thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we click and hold here and make sure you are on tweak. That way, you could just click on the vertex and drag right away, and you see it snapping onto the surface. See, this is what snapping does. It will allow you to snap that geometry right on the surface. And if you see it sinking in, if you press Shift Z, it's kind of inside the face, all right? So how do we fix this problem so we're able to still see the plane here? In order to fix this problem, we need to go to the object properties, which is right here, object properties. And then we're going to go to viewport display, and you need to make sure that this is checked on in front. So let's check that on. And now we can see our geometry right on top of the character's face there. Okay, and another thing that we need to do in order for us to be able to more accurately snap this geometry onto the surface is we need to add a shrink wrap modifier on our plane here. We can just go to object mode, and let's go to our wrench tool, which is the modifier properties, and let's add a shrink wrap modifier. Now we can click right here, the eyedropper here, click on that, and we need to use our character as a target. Okay, so that way the geometry will be, our plane will be using this sphere as a target for where it's going to lay the new mesh on. Like, there you go. And yeah, and now another thing that we need to do is we need to add a mirror modifier. So as we are manipulating our plane here, we're also seeing it on the other side. So we could just make one topology, one mesh here on one side, and it will automatically do it on the other, which will make our lives so much easier. So with our plane selected, make sure the plane is selected, we could also add a mirror modifier. So let's go to mirror. And if you add it and you don't see it, if you don't see the plane appear on this side, then that's going to be a problem. So what you need to do is you need to make sure, let me just delete the mirror now. Let me just delete the mirror modifier. Okay, so with the plane selected, you could see that the pivot is right where the plane is. Well, we need to make sure that the pivot is right in the middle of the grid. All right, we need to have it right here in the middle. So we need to have the pivot move it onto the 3D cursor. So with our plane selected, go to Object, Set Origin, and let's set it to Origin to 3D Cursor. So now it's in the middle of the grid. And so now when we go to add the mirror modifier, there you go. So we have one right here and one right there. So now if we go to our Tab key again and start editing, you can see as I move this here, it's also happening on the other side in real time, which is quite nice. Okay, and we could go to our edge select. You could also press number 2, and you could press E on your keyboard to extrude. We could have it meet in the middle. Now, what we need to do is when we are on the modifier, in the mirror modifier, we need to make sure for the mirror modifier that we check on clipping. Make sure that is turned on. That way, when we meet in the middle here, when we go in the middle and we move it, you see how it just kind of stopped there in the middle. If we have this turned off, we don't have clipping turned on, you see how we could easily like overlap this geometry in the middle, and we don't want that. We want it to just kind of snap when it meets in the middle. So that's what clipping does. So make sure you have that turned on. All right. Okay, so this is, you can just move the edge and have it work. You could create the geometry on top and have it shape around all around the high-res mesh. So you could go to the edge mode, you could press E, and you could press R to rotate. You press G to move, press E to extrude out the edges, and you rotate again. So let's say I want to create like a nice circular loop here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So just going, pressing E, press R to rotate. Fast way to create a geometry all around, you could hold Control, as you already have a face here and an edge. With the edge selected, you could hold Control and then just press right click, and then you could just have it go all around. Control, right click on the mesh. And let's say that you want to kind of have it snap. Let's say you want this to snap here on this edge. You could select this edge, and you could press F on your keyboard to bridge. Okay, so F to bridge, another important tool that you could use. And another thing that you're gonna find yourself constantly using is the adding edge loop. Control R to add an edge loop. That's going to be the loop cut. All right, so let's say that you want to have a few more edges here. All right, so let's say you want to have another edge loop to work with. Press Control R right there, and you could just click on there, and then you could go back to vertex selection and then just kind of move the vertices as needed. And then we could go ahead and go to edge selection mode, press E to extrude. Another thing that I want to show you, which is also what we're going to be using a lot, is going to be the F2. Remember, we went to edit preferences and we searched for F2 and we enabled the F2 add-on. So I want to show you right now what that does. So when you see a letter L, like a L shape here on the geometry, you could use the F2 tool to make it easier for you to create the geometry really quick. So you could select the vertex and then you hover your mouse over the opposite mesh here on this side and you press F. See how you could easily create a mesh just like that? Okay, so once again, I could click on this vertex, press F. So you could easily create a geometry like that. And I could go to my edge tool again, select this edge, press E, R to rotate, and G to move. Press 1 for the vertex. And I could go here, press E again, press R to rotate, press G to move. Okay. And I could hold Control and right click, and there you go. And I just have this kind of meet up in the middle. Go. And let's say that I want to add another extra loop here. Control R. And then could move the vertex. And once again, you see that if you see there's another letter L there, so that means I could use the F2 add-on again to quickly add a mesh. I could click on the vertex here, press F on the keyboard. There you go. Click here, hover my mouse over here, press F. So very, very handy tool that you're gonna be using a lot as you are with topologizing. We're gonna be using this a lot. And let's say I wanna just create a lot more geometry here. And let's say I want to go to the edge mode, edge select, and select all these edges. I could extrude them all at the same time. I could press E, extrude, extrude, extrude. And I could go Control R and add some edge loops here. Okay, and let's say that I have like a lot of vertices here that I need to move. What you could do to move these vertices, let's say you want to move more than just one vertex, okay? You could select one vertex and you could use this called proportional editing, which will allow you to move not only that vertex, but also the vertices surrounding those vertices, so surrounding that vertex. So I could click here and I could press G and you're gonna see like a circular shape, and you need to scroll your middle mouse button, and you could adjust the proportional editing of how much of it will be affected, how much of the vertices near the vertex you selected you want to affect, all right, with the proportional editing. So the bigger the value, the more vertex you could manipulate. The smaller the circle, the less influence it will have. All right, so this is also quite handy if you need to move like more than one vertex. And yeah, that's going to be proportional editing. You could also press O for shortcut. Another thing that we could do is we could use the sculpt mode. So we could go to our Control Tab, sculpt mode, and we could smooth out our mesh. So let's say we have some jagged edges here that we want to smooth out. We could use our smoothing brush. You could bring down the brush size, press F to bring down the brush size, and you could smooth out. And what you want to do though is you want to see the wireframe. In order for you to see the wireframe, you need to go to the overlay, viewport overlay, and make sure geometry, turn on wireframe. Now we could smooth this out as we need to. You could, what's cool about this is you could use any of the brushes here and manipulate the geometry. And the geometry, our topology here is still sticking onto the surface of our character's face, which is really nice. And now we can just turn off our wireframe and go back to our object mode. The last thing that I want to show you is being able to turn this into X-ray mode. Sometimes you might need this, so you could, with your topology, new topology selected, you could press Alt-Z on your keyboard. So you have Alt-Z and you press the Tab key and you could edit your topology while you're on X-ray mode, which could be a lot easier if you want to see more of your geometry and your character's face is going to be a little bit faint. So this could be really useful if you want to look at your character and your topology in a brand new perspective. And another thing you could do is you could go to your material, your viewport shading here, and you could turn on back face culling. So that also changes your back faces here. So if you don't want to see your back face, if that will make it easier for you to create your topology, you could turn it off and turn it on. Yeah, so that's basically all the tools that you need to know. That's going to help you a lot when it comes to creating a new topology for your character and retopologizing. So I suggest that if this is your first time retopologizing, that you just practice on retopologizing on something simple like this before you move on to the next video. Just go ahead and practice the tools that I have showed you guys, the extruding, bridging, and also the F2 add-on that I showed you. You know, practice using these tools. Yeah, I think that retopologizing could be actually quite relaxing, and it's a very important part of the process. And yeah, I suggest you kind of just get used to the tools here first before you move on and retopologize our realistic character. And yeah, just go ahead and continue on with this, and I'll see you guys in the next video after you guys get your practice on.